why does the world need a digital comics coalition?
Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
Whether or not the world needs a digital comics coalition, I don't care as much. We need it, or at least I personally need it. I have to say it's been great just to talk to other people that are attempting to do the same thing. We're all breaking new ground, and to be able to communicate with other people that are wrestling with the same problems it's been a wonderful experience just to talk to everybody that whose picture is represented here. So I'm hoping the world can benefit from it, but from a completely selfish point of view, it's just been tremendous for me to hear the things other people are going through, the things other people have tried, and to know that we're not alone.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about amongst ourselves. I mean, currently we only have different digital comics platforms. However, I mean, we're still talking about this, but we want to create something that is more like a check and balance system. It's not just we check each other's, I guess, platforms, but we could invite other nonprofit organizations, other creators, where we could figure out how to help each other. I think the Meltdown is a great example where we were invited to speak at the last panel. And the benefit that we got was Felix and Meltdown were able to form a partnership, try to help each other. So like when we have a problem and like-minded people come together, you know, you start creating these synergies that we don't even, that we didn't anticipate before. So I think it just benefits everybody.
So Felix and Adam, that's a really interesting partnership between a brick and mortar print comics retailer and a digital publisher. Can you guys embellish on that a little bit and tell us a little bit more about how that happened?
I think when you're talking about Meltdown Comics, I mean, we like to think of ourselves as a little bit more than a brick and mortar store, even though that is our foundation. We almost have become a cultural community center for everything comic books, nerd-related type stuff. We've got, our fingerprints in YouTube and podcasting. We've got we're partners with Nerdist. We have a showroom, and they're doing different things out of the back of the comic book store. So frequently, we just have so much going on, and I just think the natural progression of comic books, is digital comics, digital delivery of comic books, and I think that we wanted to be a part of that. And if you know, or if you don't know, Felix actually went to Meltdown University, which is we teach comic book courses here, and so Felix got his start here. It was just, hey, look, we helped him early on, teaching comic book classes, and now we found a way that we can try to work together. We can try to bring our name to the comic book, to the digital comic book platform. And it just seems like a good partnership. So we're exploring the ways in which it can be mutually beneficial to all of us. But, I mean, look, if we've got a community here every day, every night with activities, they should also know about digital comic books. I mean, it's a part of the culture now, and I think that we respect that. And so that's where this, at least, was the genesis for Meltdown. And then as why Felix thought it was beneficial, he can talk on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Through every word, this is not a store. This is a culture. And many people know Meltdown beyond our city walls. People from New York I talk to, they know about Meltdown through different activities they do. So we are plugging into a culture, and this is what we need. And
I think what it also does, I think it helps, get people excited. It ideally will increase subscribers, which is, I think, what everyone wants to do. They want to increase the eyes. They want to increase the awareness. And if we can meld our brand awareness together to benefit, then that's fantastic for everyone. And again, then it transfers hopefully to the Digital Comics Coalition, and everyone else working together. I mean, it's about organization and trying to lay a foundation, and I think obviously the coalition is the start of it, and it's already proved beneficial for people, it seems. So,
well, that's interesting because with Madefire, we have a similar relationship with Flying Colors Comics and other cool stuff that's owned by Joe Field. Joe's the creator of Free Comic Book Day, and he's also the director of the Comics Pro Retailers Organization. And Joe's hosted a couple of story nights. He's hosted several events for Madefire. And I always hear about this war between print and digital, but I don't see it in the real world. Joe is just as open to digital as you are, Adam, and he sees the same thing. This is about culture. And Joe's made the statement, anything that gets people to read comics is good for me. Any delivery system, it's good for the comics as a whole. So is anybody else, Mark or Min, are you guys experiencing any of that with retailers that you know?
I had my face to the fire when it came to that, because I was one of the first coming out, very publicly 3-4 years ago about digital and how I perceived the relationship with print to be. The good news is I was wrong. I was of the impression back then, 3-4 years ago, that digital was going to pretty quickly supplant print, or at least slowly supplant print. And there were a million retailers with pitchforks and torches happy to tell me how wrong I was. The good news is I was wrong. And I'm not quite sure what to attribute that to, but I can say now in the interim, I actually have bought a store myself. I actually own a store here in Muncie, Indiana called Aw Yeah Comics with my girlfriend, and we're in deep. Look, I wanted to be on the front lines. I wanted to have boots on the ground and if I was going to talk about the relationship between print and digital and how one can inform the other, I wanted to have my boots on the ground and have, a foot in both camps, if you will, to extend the metaphor. And we've not, again, I liken it to what Adam said. We've not seen it. We've seen instead the reverse, that people are intrigued by what they see with digital. They can be overwhelmed by it. The analogy I use is imagine if you had never listened to music on your computer at all ever and went to iTunes for the first time as an adult and tried to make heads or tails out of what is there with no filter whatsoever. And it's the same with comics, with the new comics audience. They may know of comics, but they haven't read much in the way of comics. So they can go on digital and get a taste of it and maybe be steered in certain directions and steered to some of our platforms. But I also like the fact that brick and mortar serves as sort of a gatekeeper and a way of saying, okay, if you like this on Thrillbent, or if you like this on Tapastic, or if you like this on Madefire, and this is what you're digging, then maybe you should try something like this, or maybe you'd like something like this.
Well, yeah, I think because I've had this conversation with Joe at Flying Colors, and you were saying like you weren't sure why digital hasn't supplanted the comic stores yet, and for me, it's buying comics is only one of the reasons why I go to the comic book store, and I'm sure it's the same. You've experienced the same thing, Adam. I go to the comic book store to talk to the guys about comics. And there's like one guy named Andy who will always give me something. He knows what I like because I've been going there for 20 years. He'll always pick a book that falls into what I like, and then he'll act it out for me, and I'll always end up buying it. I'm not going to get that experience necessarily from a digital format. There's a social element to going to the comic book store that I think is always going to be there. The interesting thing for me is to see how the digital environment is going to evolve into that social, because I don't think places like Meltdown or Flying Colors are ever going to go away. Because comic book fans need that social aspect. The question is, how is the digital stuff going to get woven in to what Meltdown does and to what Flying Colors does? That's what I think. That's what makes me curious. But
one of the ideas we have is I want to compare a store to a theater, a movie theater, and digital to your home theater experience, where a theater you will get the latest issue or latest movie and then you go home and you rewatch your 80s movies, 90s, and such. So we are in digital space. We can store classics. We can store back issues. We can store things forever, accessible forever from everywhere. So when people come to the store, they can get their latest stuff, and then each book that you can go and see where you can find the back issues of the same series on digital platforms, so you can go and introduce yourself to the rest of the series. So this is where the store and the digital can go hand in hand.
Adam, do you agree with what Felix just said? You were about to say something as well?
Yeah. So I just think that really it's just out there. We're still trying to figure out how best to meld everything. I think clearly with the store, it's the social aspect. That is key. You come here, like you said, Joe, you're talking to your Andy, and he's giving you recommendations. It's nice to have the human interaction. I mean, you can't just sit there and play on the iPad all day. I mean, I tell my kids, get off the iPad, go talk to someone. And part of that is at the comic book store. Also, I mean, you know, I like when my kids are reading a book, and I bring them to the comic book store to have them go and look at all the different colors and the characters and the pictures and whatnot, and let them identify with something. I don't know that display or that emotional connection that you get when you're at a comic book store can necessarily be found in digital immediately. Eventually you can get there, you can find it, you can go through all the stories. But I think when you're at a comic book store and you can then direct people to digital comics, hey, here's something. You like the new Bone series, or you like Bone series for your kid? Hey, look, it's on this digital. You can read the rest. But here, buy this. And the kids want that. And just that's introducing a new audience. As to the older audience, I think there's always a place for collectors. And people in the comic book world love tangible things. They want the collection. Some get too big. You can now have it on digital. But for me personally, every Wednesday, I look forward to going to the comic book store, talking to the people behind the desk, seeing people that I see there every Wednesday, and buying that comic, holding it, reading it, taking it home. I also love the digital. There's room for both, and I think the more awareness you can create, you're still going to have people buying hard copies, and you're still going to have people buying digital. And I think eventually they'll all rise, especially with the fact that everything's out in the movie world now, where people just want something. So there's room for. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Let me ask you this real quick, Adam. When I imagine the comic book store of the future, 20, 30 years from now, I imagine something that's almost like a bar, where you sit at a bar. The bar is a big light table that has comics that you could choose from. There's somebody behind it making recommendation. There's videos all over the walls. There's a little spot for print in the same way that vinyl records are, but it's a bar. It's like a place where you go and everything's digital, and you're buying the digital from there. Is that completely outlandish? Or
No, I don't think it is, because I think if you're focused on the community element of it all, and we've talked about it here at Meltdown. We've talked about, we're planning for Meltdown for the next 100 years right now. And part of that is having a digital comics imprint. Comic-Con every day for the next 100 years. That's kind of what we've envisioned Meltdown as. And part of that is having a coffee shop or a bar for social gatherings. We want to have this place where you can have catering. We want to have a kitchen, so all the events that we can have them properly. And I think that's probably the future. And with that, we've got the bar with the digital screens where you're buying it digitally, like you said. But I think really it comes down to community. And, we're doing a million different programs to try to get that going. We do a comics jam where we have people come in every once a month, get together, chip in $2, draw a picture, and then we present a little zine the next month they come back. people still want that interaction. If we've got a group right here now drawing once a month, and we say to them, hey, look at these digital comics. We've got the audience. We've got the people who are going to not only want to draw, but they want to consume, and the people want to consume in different ways. It should be an option to have both. And so I think your idea of the comic book store of the future is perfectly okay.
I think a lot of people compare how Barnes and Nobles and Borders have been pretty much, they went bankrupt because of the Amazons and the digital books. But I think it's unfair to compare those large brick and mortar booksellers versus a small comic book shop, because like Adam said, like you said, the comic book stores offer not only comic books but a lot more. It's a total experience, a social experience. So when you have a community aspect to, which is like a big part of the store strategy, you can never get rid of that. That's why customers keep coming back.
I agree with everything you just said, and it spurred me. I have to ask Mark, as somebody who owns a comic book store for print and also owns a digital publisher, what's your take on all of this, about the future?
Oh, without question. I mean, in a perfect world, we would have a kiosk, Thrillbent and Tapastic or whatever, all these, or one coalition would have a kiosk in the comic store along with everything else, where it's just as simple as, touch and buy, or download instantly to your device, whatever. That's the perfect place, and that's the perfect sweet spot. Treat it like any other form of comics buying. But want to flip this for a second and bring Felix back in for a second, because what's interesting about that platform that Felix has is there is a social aspect to it as well, right? Felix, there's the idea that readers are able to sort of communicate with each other through the comic, or as I recall, walk us through that a little bit.
Right now,
the annotations and so forth that you were talking about.
Yeah. So right now, a user can record his own voice, attribute it to specific parts of the page, and share it with the public or friends. And we are talking about, again, a creator can do that, and just the user can do that. A kid can narrate the book he likes and share it with his friends. So yeah, absolutely. Everything that can be touched and modified and everything can be immediately distributed to hopefully hundreds of thousands of people immediately.
I think one of the things, I think all of this aspect about the brick and mortar stores interacting with digital is very exciting. I do want to say, though, that there is a large potential comics audience out there that doesn't have access to brick and mortar stores. And I think that's one of the big benefits of digital now, is that we can have direct access to an audience, which in turn, and I think that this is something we've seen happen with brick and mortar stores, is that if you can connect with people who don't have easy access to a brick and mortar store, they may be more inclined to seek them out if they can experience them, if they can experience comics just on their digital devices first and get addicted. But we do have to remember that the number of, the comics distribution system has been kind of messed up for a very long time, and there's an awful lot of parts of the world that just don't have access to brick and mortar stores, and it's unfortunate. Once upon a time, comics were available kind of everywhere, in drugstores and in department stores, and that's not around. So I feel like, in general, just with print books, it would be, we do sorely need a new distribution system, and I'm hoping that digital distribution of comics, getting those stories available to more people, is the beginning of that.
I also think it should be remembered, the appetite for comic books, it seems like it's at an all-time high. I mean, when you talk about the convention circuit, everything seems to be selling out. I mean, it's exploding. There is an appetite there, and there's enough people, I think, to consume both. And so I think, you're right, Doug. People don't have the access. They want the access. This might be their gateway in through the digital medium. So there's people out there, and they want to read comic books. And I think this is just another way in which to deliver that.
Well, and there's a lot of untapped marketplaces. Min and I have talked about Korea. Des Taylor and I have talked about Dubai. Dubai has a Comic-Con now, and Des has gone twice, and he says he says every time he shows people the digital stuff that Madefire was doing, they're like completely blown away because they don't have comic book stores in a lot of the places in the Middle East. So,
yeah, one thing I wanted to add about the brick and mortar stores and digital. Every Wednesday when the new comics come in, my son can't wait for me to take him right to the store after school. And at the same time, he wants to run up and down the racks and see what's new and what he likes, see if it's come in yet. And at the same time, when we come home, he wants to look at digital, at comics, at Scrollon. He wants to know what's new, what's going on. And I think that's the thing was about raising a new generation of kids that are really more, they're already more proficient in digital than I am. They know how to use all the devices and get the most out of them. And it's been really fun to watch him really enjoy it so much.
That's a really good point. Because I personally think that the demographic most likely to consume this is about 10 years old right now.
Yeah,
in about 10 years, those people are going to be the major consumers of this. The thing I'm going to wrap this with is it's great to see the fact that in an old world marketplace 50 years ago, you guys would all be competitors. But in today's world, you're working with each other to achieve a common goal. It's really great to see that you don't see each other as a threat. And I think that's something that's new to the 21st century. I think it's going to be beneficial to comics as a whole.
Right. I would add to that, when the last panel discussion we had, that was actually brought up about how everyone's getting along. And then I don't know if it was you, Mark, that said, well, wait till everyone starts making a lot of money, and then we'll see. We'll see if everyone's still hanging out.
When we can be ruthless competitors.
Yeah,
that's a damn good point. But
yeah, so
eventually
maybe
there's going to be some kind of a standardization that goes on. So everything that everybody's doing, eventually I think that's going to happen. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out in the future.
Yeah,
right.
But I don't.
Yeah,
I don't. Oh, go. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, I agree with you. At the same time, then by all means, let's try out everything now, because you're absolutely right. Everything does tend to end up standardized. I do think that one of the reasons that it's not a deliberately competitive field at this point is first off, the monetization is very small. None of us is buying yachts and motorhomes and gold watches, Apple watches with our revenue. That's a big part of it. But the other part of it is that the audience is so vast. The potential audience for a digital comic is 7 billion people. Yeah. So we're not in any position at this point where we kind of feel like we're elbowing each other out of the room. There's plenty of, for every internet connection there is out there, there's room for a digital comic.
That is a damn good point.
We're in a very unique position right now. I don't think that this time is going to be repeated. And I think we should take advantage of it. That's why we are, I think, we all feel that we're part of something now that it's going to become either huge or it's going to just disappear entirely. I'm betting it's going to become huge, and I think the rest of us are too. So it's very exciting for us just to interact and communicate, especially at this time when we can all become friends. We do hope that we will all be making so much money that we have to become ruthless later, but we're not now. So let's enjoy it while we can.